security program can have excellent intentions and even strong technical ideas, but without a way to manage work consistently, the program tends to become reactive and chaotic. Operationalizing program management means turning security goals into a steady flow of planned work that can be tracked, coordinated, and proven. The word operationalize is important because it implies moving from plans and promises into repeatable routines that survive staff changes, competing priorities, and sudden incidents. In security, that is especially hard because there is always more that could be done, and threats do not wait politely for the next planning cycle. Program management gives security a way to make progress while still staying flexible, and it gives the rest of the organization a way to understand what security is doing and why. This episode is about 4 practical tools that make program management real: roadmaps that show direction, backlogs that organize work, dependency handling that prevents surprises, and proof that demonstrates outcomes instead of relying on trust alone. For beginners, you can think of this as building the operating system for the security program itself. A roadmap is the high-level picture of where the security program is going over a defined period of time, such as a quarter or a year. The roadmap is not a list of every task, because it is meant to communicate direction, priorities, and the reason behind them. A good roadmap connects to risk and to business needs, which means it should answer questions like what risks are being reduced, what capabilities are being built, and what outcomes stakeholders can expect. Roadmaps are also about sequencing, because you cannot do everything at once, and certain improvements only make sense after earlier foundations are in place. For example, it is hard to improve advanced monitoring if you do not yet have stable logging and asset visibility, and it is hard to enforce policies if you cannot measure compliance. Beginners sometimes assume a roadmap is a promise carved in stone, but in security, it should be a guided plan that can adapt when threats or business conditions change. The key is that changes to the roadmap should be intentional and explained, not random and hidden. That is how a roadmap builds credibility rather than becoming another document people ignore. A roadmap becomes more useful when it is built around outcomes rather than activities, because activities can be completed without improving security. An outcome might be that critical systems have consistent baseline configurations, that incident response time improves, or that exposure to a common threat type decreases. Activities are the tasks you perform to reach the outcome, like deploying an agent, updating a configuration, or writing a procedure. If you only list activities, stakeholders may think progress equals completion of tasks, even if the tasks do not change risk in a meaningful way. If you list outcomes, you force the program to explain why the work matters and how success will be recognized. This is also where roadmaps help protect a security team from being pulled into random urgent requests, because the roadmap provides a reference point for what is most important. For beginners, it is helpful to see a roadmap as the program's narrative, a clear story about how you move from today's reality to a safer future state. A good narrative makes it easier to gain support and to defend priorities. Backlogs are where roadmaps become actionable, because a backlog is the organized set of work items that the team may do, has decided to do, or is currently doing. A backlog contains tasks at different sizes, from small improvements to larger initiatives broken into pieces. It is common for beginners to confuse a backlog with a to-do list, but a backlog is more intentional because items are prioritized, described clearly, and reviewed regularly. In security, a backlog is especially valuable because it helps you manage the constant tension between planned improvement work and unplanned incident-driven work. Without a backlog, urgent requests can crowd out important foundational work, and the program can remain stuck in a cycle of firefighting. With a backlog, you have a visible queue that makes trade-offs explicit, because adding something new means either removing something else or changing the priority order. This visibility helps leadership understand that capacity is finite, which supports realistic planning. For beginners, it helps to think of a backlog as a shared memory of what matters and what is waiting, so work does not disappear into hallway conversations. A well-managed backlog includes enough detail that work can start without guesswork, but not so much detail that writing descriptions becomes the work itself. Each item should describe what is being done, why it matters, and what done means, because ambiguity is one of the biggest causes of wasted effort. For example, saying improve endpoint monitoring is vague, while saying increase coverage for corporate laptops to a defined level with defined telemetry is clearer and testable. Backlog items should also include information about risk or impact, because that supports prioritization. Prioritization can be based on exposure, criticality of affected systems, likelihood of exploitation, or alignment with business deadlines. But the key is that the basis is explicit. Beginners sometimes assume prioritization is purely technical, but in program management, it is a combination of technical risk and business reality. A backlog also benefits from regular grooming, meaning reviewing items, updating details, removing obsolete work, and reordering priorities. That grooming prevents the backlog from becoming a graveyard of old intentions. Dependencies are the hidden forces that can make a security plan either succeed smoothly or collapse into delays and frustration. A dependency is anything your work relies on that is outside your direct control, such as another team's time, a system change window, an infrastructure upgrade, legal review, or vendor coordination. In security programs, dependencies are everywhere because security rarely owns all the systems it needs to protect. Beginners often underestimate dependencies and assume security can simply decide and implement, but most improvements require cooperation. Managing dependencies means identifying them early, communicating them clearly, and tracking them as first-class items rather than as afterthoughts. For example, a security team might want better logging, but they depend on system owners to enable it and on storage teams to support retention. If you ignore those dependencies until late, the project stalls and people blame each other. If you identify them early, you can schedule coordination, set expectations, and reduce surprises. Dependency management also includes understanding sequencing, because some tasks cannot begin until others are done. You might need an asset inventory before you can measure coverage, and you might need identity cleanup before you can enforce access controls. In a security program, sequencing is often misunderstood because people want to jump directly to the most visible improvement, like deploying a new detection capability, without building the foundations it needs. A mature program uses dependencies to build a sensible order of operations, ensuring that each improvement has the prerequisites to succeed. It also uses dependencies to communicate why some work takes time, because timelines are often driven by outside constraints rather than internal effort. For beginners, it helps to see dependencies as the connecting threads between teams and systems. When you manage the threads, the work moves. When you ignore them, the threads tangle and progress stops. Proof is the final piece in this episode title, and proof is what turns program management into credibility. Proof means evidence that work was completed and that it produced the intended outcome, not merely that effort was expended. In security, proof can include measurements, reports, audit trails, or documented validation steps that show a control is actually in place and functioning. Beginners sometimes think proof is only for auditors, but proof is also for the security team because it prevents false confidence. You can believe a control is deployed, but if you cannot demonstrate coverage and effectiveness, you may be depending on assumptions. Proof also helps leadership make decisions because it shows which investments are working and which are not. For example, proof might show that response times improved after a process change, or that vulnerability exposure decreased after remediation workflow improvements. Proof makes success visible and makes gaps undeniable, which supports continuous improvement. A helpful beginner concept is that proof should be designed into the work, not bolted on at the end. If you wait until a project is complete to figure out how to prove it, you may discover that you never collected the data you need. Designing proof into the plan means defining success criteria up front, deciding how you will measure them, and ensuring the measurement is feasible. It also means documenting decisions and changes as you go, so you can reconstruct what happened later. Proof is also important for learning, because without proof you cannot easily tell whether a control reduced risk or simply shifted it. For example, a strict prevention control might reduce malware incidents, but increase user workarounds that create a different risk. Proof helps you see these unintended effects and adjust. For beginners, proof can be thought of as the difference between hoping and knowing. Hope can feel good, but knowing is what allows you to manage security responsibly. Roadmaps, backlogs, dependencies, and proof also work together as a system, and the system is what makes program management operational rather than theoretical. The roadmap sets direction and communicates priorities, helping align stakeholders and secure support. The backlog turns direction into manageable work items that can be prioritized, assigned, and tracked. Dependency management keeps work realistic, preventing plans from being disconnected from what other teams can deliver. Proof closes the loop by showing outcomes and enabling leadership to adjust priorities based on evidence. If you have a roadmap without a backlog, you have vision without execution. If you have a backlog without a roadmap, you have tasks without a coherent story, which makes it hard to defend priorities. If you ignore dependencies, you create plans that look good but fail in practice. If you skip proof, you cannot tell whether progress is real, and trust eventually erodes. For beginners, seeing this as a loop helps you understand that program management is continuous, not a one-time planning event. Another practical point is that operational program management needs a rhythm, because rhythm is what keeps work moving without constant reinvention. A rhythm can include regular planning, regular review of progress, regular backlog grooming, and regular reporting of outcomes. The exact timing can vary, but the idea is that security work should not rely on random bursts of effort. Rhythm also creates predictability for partner teams, because they know when security decisions will be made and when status will be reviewed. This predictability reduces conflict and reduces the chance that security appears unexpectedly with urgent demands. Rhythm also supports transparency, because regular reporting makes it harder for work to quietly stall. For beginners, it is useful to understand that many security failures happen not because people did not know what to do, but because work did not get managed consistently. A rhythm is a simple way to protect against that drift. Operationalizing program management also means being honest about capacity and about the impact of unplanned work. Incidents, urgent vulnerabilities, and business emergencies can consume time, and pretending they do not will break your plans. A mature program expects interruptions and builds buffers or flexible planning to accommodate them. It also tracks the cost of unplanned work, because that cost can justify investments that reduce future interruptions, such as better automation, better prevention, or better processes. Beginners sometimes think program management is about forcing a plan to happen no matter what, but in security, it is more about adapting without losing direction. When you manage work transparently, you can explain why a roadmap changed and what trade-offs were made. That explanation builds trust, because stakeholders can see that security is making intentional choices rather than reacting randomly. Over time, that trust makes it easier to coordinate dependencies and gain support for the next set of improvements. When you step back, operationalizing program management is about turning security into a measurable, deliverable function that can improve over time. Roadmaps clarify where you are going and why it matters, which helps align security with real risk and business goals. Backlogs organize the work so it can be prioritized and executed without losing track of important tasks. Dependencies are identified and managed so plans reflect reality and coordination happens early rather than in crisis. Proof demonstrates that work produced outcomes, which builds credibility and enables smarter decisions in the next cycle. For a brand new learner, the most important insight is that security programs do not mature by accident. They mature because someone builds a practical system for turning goals into results, even when the environment is messy and unpredictable. Program management is that system, and when it is operational, it becomes one of the strongest foundations a security program can have.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.